I built my catering company from scratch without a single dollar from my family, and I did it while they spent every holiday telling me I was throwing my life away chasing pots and pans instead of a real career. My mother said it nicer than my father did. She'd touch my hand across the table at Christmas and say, "Sweetheart, cooking is a hobby, not a plan." My father didn't bother with the softening. He'd look at whatever dish I'd brought, because I always brought something, always showed up with food, even when they made me feel like a stranger, and he'd say, "Who's going to take you seriously?" I started taking myself seriously at 24. I had $3,200 in a savings account, a commercial kitchen I rented by the hour in Scarborough, and one corporate client who needed lunch service for 40 people twice a week. That was it. That was the whole thing. My brother thought it was a phase. He was doing his MBA at Rotman at the time, and he had this way of talking about my business like it was a lemonade stand I'd set up on the driveway. He'd say things like, "Good for you, keeping busy," the way you'd say it to a child who'd just finished a finger painting. His girlfriend, now his wife, was polite enough to change the subject whenever it came up. That was almost worse. My younger sister was the only one who believed me. She'd come to the kitchen on Saturdays sometimes and help me prep, and she'd taste things and say, "This is actually insane, you know that." She meant it as a compliment. She still does. She was the one who drove me to the bank the day I signed my first commercial lease. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened. I am not someone who holds grudges easily. I spent years trying to earn my family's respect. I showed up. I sent updates. I texted photos of events I'd catered, gallery openings, law firm holiday parties, a fundraiser gala at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. I invited them to things. My father came to one event, stood at the edge of the room for 20 minutes, ate a canapé, and left without saying anything to me. I stopped expecting it eventually, not bitterly, just practically. I had a company to run. By the time I was 31, Harvest & Co. had 12 full-time staff, 2 refrigerated vans, and a contract with a mid-sized financial services firm downtown for their weekly client lunches. We catered 3 weddings, over 200 guests that summer alone. I had moved out of the rented kitchen 3 years earlier and into our own space in the Distillery District, 1,400 square feet, with a loading dock and a proper cold room. I had also, quietly, become a commercial property owner. That part happened almost by accident. A client of mine, an older woman who ran an estate management firm, had mentioned offhand that she was looking to offload a mixed-use building in Leslieville. The ground floor had a cafe tenant. The upper 2 floors were office space. The numbers were complicated, but the price, for what it was good. I'd been saving. My accountant said it was a sound investment. I made an offer. The deal closed in February, just after my 32nd birthday. I didn't announce it. I didn't post about it. I told my sister, my accountant, my lawyer, and 2 friends from culinary school. That was it. My parents didn't know. My brother didn't know. That mattered more than I realized it would. The meeting was a Thursday in October. I had 2 investors coming in from Vancouver, a husband and wife, who ran a food and hospitality fund, and who had expressed serious interest in backing our expansion into meal kit delivery. I'd spent 6 weeks preparing for this meeting. My operations manager, a methodical man named Prentice, who had been with me since year 2, had helped me put together a full deck. We'd rehearsed the numbers until I could say them in my sleep. The meeting was at 11 in the morning, at my office in the Distillery District. I had coffee and pastry set out. My assistant had confirmed the boardroom twice. Everything was in order. My investors, Claudette and her husband, arrived at 5 to 11. They were warm, professional, the kind of people who make you feel like the meeting is already going well before anyone says anything of substance. We sat down. I started walking through the deck. 15 minutes in, Prentice appeared in the doorway. He had a look on his face that I had never seen before, half apology, half alarm. "There are some people at the front asking for you," he said. "They say they're family." I felt something cold move through me, not quite fear. More like recognition. I said, "Tell them I'm in a meeting." He disappeared. Claudette asked a question about our projected Q2 margins. I answered it. I was halfway through explaining our supplier agreements when the boardroom door opened. My father walked in first. He looked exactly as he always looks, pressed shirt, silver hair, the particular expression of a man who has never once believed he is unwelcome anywhere. My mother was behind him, holding her handbag with both hands, and my brother was behind her, in a jacket I recognized as new, carrying a folder. A folder. Claudette and her husband turned around in their chairs. The room went very quiet. "Dad," I said. My voice was flat. "I'm in a meeting." "We know," my father said. He pulled out the chair at the far end of the table. My chair, the one I had been sitting in, and sat down in it. "That's why we're here." I looked at my mother. She looked at the wall. My brother set the folder on the table and pushed it toward me. I didn't touch it. "We've been talking," my father said. "As a family, we think it's time for us to be more involved in what you've built here. You wouldn't have the work ethic you have without how you were raised. We think that deserves to be recognized." I waited. 20%, he said. "A combined family stake in Harvest & Co., split between your mother, your brother, and myself. We're not asking for operational control, just equity. And a seat at the table going forward." Claudette made a small sound. I couldn't tell if it was shock or the beginning of a cough. "You built this on our foundation," my brother added. He said it like he'd rehearsed it. "We supported you." There it was, the version of events they had agreed on in whatever kitchen or living room this plan had been assembled. I thought about every Christmas I'd shown up with food, every update I'd sent to silence, the one event my father had attended, alone, for 20 minutes. "You didn't support me," I said. "We raised you," my mother said, finally speaking. "Everything you are." "Everything I am," I said quietly, "I made. With my own money, my own hours, my own risk." My father leaned back in the chair. He looked at Claudette and her husband the way men like him always look at witnesses. Not embarrassed, but calculating. Deciding how much the audience changes his leverage. "You lease this space," he said. "I know the management company that handles this building. One call and they'll be reviewing your terms." He said it like that, casually, in front of two investors who had flown in from Vancouver to talk about the future of my company. I felt something settle inside me, not anger, clarity. "Call them," I said. My father blinked. "I'm serious," I said. "Go ahead. Call the building manager, right now. I'll put it on speaker." He took out his phone. I think he expected me to back down. I watched him dial. He put it on the table between us, on speaker, the way you do when you want everyone in the room to hear something. It rang twice. "Harvest & Co. Properties, this is the management line." A recorded message, then a redirect, then a live voice my property manager, a patient man named Alexander, who handled the day-to-day for my building. "Hi," my father said. "I'm calling about the commercial lease for Harvest & Co. in the Distillery District. I'd like to speak to whoever manages that property about reviewing the tenant's terms." A pause. "Sir, I'm going to need to clarify something before we go any further." Alexander's voice was even, professional. "The tenant you're referring to is also the building owner. Harvest & Co. is not a leased tenant. The owner of this property is the director of that company. She owns the building." My father stared at the phone. "I'm sorry," he said. "Can you repeat that?" "The property owner and the business owner are the same person," Alexander said. "There's no landlord to contact on this matter. You'd be contacting her directly." My brother made a sound I cannot adequately describe. I reached across the table and ended the call. The room was completely silent for a moment. Claudette's husband had his hands folded on the table and was looking at them. Claudette was looking at me with an expression I still think about sometimes. Not pity, not discomfort, something more like recognition. "I think," I said, "we should continue our meeting." My father didn't move immediately. He sat in my chair for another few seconds, and I watched him do the thing men like him do when something doesn't go the way they planned. He reassembled his face into something that looked like it had never been surprised. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," I said. "Prentice is going to walk you out now." Prentice appeared in the doorway as if he'd been waiting because he had been. He's that kind of person. He held the door open and looked at my father with the perfect professional blankness of someone who has been well paid and is very good at their job. My mother left without looking at me. My brother left without saying anything else. My father paused at the door, and I think he was going to say something more, but Prentice stepped slightly forward, and whatever my father saw in that small movement changed his mind. The door closed. Claudette let out a breath. "I apologize," I said immediately. "That should never have." "Don't apologize," Claudette said. She said it firmly, not unkindly. "Can I ask you something?" I said yes. "You knew that might happen. she said, before the meeting. You were prepared for it. I thought about how to answer that. The truth was, I hadn't known they would come that day, specifically. But I had known, for a long time, that something like this was coming. You learn to read the patterns in families like mine. The silence after I announced the building purchase to my accountant, the careful questions my brother had started asking my mother about my finances, the lunch my father had invited me to in September that I declined because something about it felt off. I knew it was possible, I said. Claudette nodded slowly. She looked at her husband. He looked at her. Something passed between them that I wasn't entirely part of. All right, she said. Let's keep going. We finished the meeting. It ran another 90 minutes. By the end of it, we had agreed on the term sheet framework for a $1.2 million investment in exchange for a minority equity stake and a board observer seat. Claudette shook my hand at the door and said, I've sat in a lot of boardrooms. I've never seen anyone handle something like that and still close a meeting. I didn't know what to say to that. I thanked her. Prentice walked them to the elevator. I stood in the empty boardroom for a few minutes after everyone left. The pastries were mostly untouched. Someone had moved one of the chairs slightly out of alignment, and I straightened it back. What happened next happened quickly and then slowly, and I went to be honest about all of it. My father filed a noise complaint about the loading dock. My property manager handled it. It was resolved in a week. There was nothing to substantiate it because we'd always been within city bylaws. My brother called me twice. I didn't answer either time. His voicemails were long. The first one was angry. The second one was something closer to bewildered, like he genuinely couldn't understand what had gone wrong, which told me everything I needed to know about how he had understood the situation going in. My mother sent a text message. It said, "We were only trying to be part of your life." I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone down and went back to work. The harder part was the other thing. About 2 weeks after the boardroom, I started hearing from people in my professional network. A colleague who ran a catering company in North York mentioned that she'd heard something about a dispute within my company, something about financial irregularities. A contact at a restaurant association said someone had reached out to him, asking pointed questions about my licensing. I knew immediately where it was coming from. I called my lawyer. She is a precise, unhurried woman who has handled my contracts since year 3. She listened to everything I told her and then said, document everything, every conversation, every name, every date, send it all to me. I did. It took 6 weeks, but we traced enough of it back. My father had made calls. He had used language carefully, never outright lies, but implications, insinuations, the kind of thing that is very hard to disprove and very easy to spread. My lawyer sent a formal letter, a strongly worded one, of the kind that makes clear that the next step is litigation. The calls stopped. I won't pretend there wasn't a period in there that was genuinely difficult. I am not made of stone. There were nights where I sat in my car in the parking lot of my building and just sat there for a while before going in. I had built something real. I had done it without them, and they had tried to dismantle it anyway, not because they needed the money. My father is not a poor man, but because they could not tolerate that I had succeeded on terms they didn't control. My sister called me during that period often. She had figured out that something was happening, though I didn't tell her everything. She would call on Tuesday nights, which was random and therefore consistent in a way that felt like its own kind of message. She didn't always say much. Sometimes we just talked about other things. Our friend's new baby, a restaurant she'd tried in Kensington Market, a funny thing that had happened at her job. That mattered more than she probably knows. Claudette called too, once, about a month after the meeting, to check in on the term sheet timeline. At the end of the call, she said, "How are you doing?" And I could tell she meant it as a real question, not a formality. I said I was fine. She said, "Good." Then she said, "For what it's worth, the way you ran that meeting, that's the version of you we're investing in." I thought about that for a long time afterward. The term sheet was finalized in December. We signed in January. The investment closed in early February, almost exactly 1 year after I'd taken possession of the building. Prentice made a joke about the timing. It was a good joke. I hired 2 additional kitchen staff in March. We launched the meal kit line in April, a small soft launch, 3 SKUs, a wait list that filled in 11 days. Claudette sent a text message the morning the wait list closed that just said, "Told you." My father has not called since my lawyer's letter went out. My brother sends me a message every few months, brief, almost careful, the way you message someone when you're not sure what you're allowed to say. I read them. I haven't responded to any of them. I don't know yet if I ever will. That's a question I don't feel any urgency to answer. My mother sent a card at Christmas, a real card in an envelope with a stamp. She wrote 3 sentences inside. She said she was proud of me. She said she was proud of me. She said she hoped I was well. She said she missed me. I put it in the drawer of my desk at the office, and sometimes I think about it and I don't know what it means yet, and I've decided that's okay. I know what some people will say, that I should have handled it differently, that I should have called them, sat them down, given them a chance to explain. Maybe. I've thought about it. But I also know what it costs to spend years trying to earn something from people who have already decided what you're worth. I know what it does to you, quietly, over time. And I know what it felt like to sit in that boardroom, in my building, in the company I built, and say, call them. I'll put it on speaker. That felt like something. Not revenge exactly, more like the moment a room finally comes into focus. I did it without a single dollar from them. I did it while they were busy telling me I couldn't. And the building I work in every day, the loading dock, the cold room, the boardroom where it all happened, is mine. In every sense of the word. I walk in every morning and I don't think about any of this. Most days, that's true. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in that boardroom. Not the drama of it, the phone on the table, my father's face when Alexander said what he said. I've thought about the quieter thing underneath it, which is this. None of what happened to my family would have been possible if I had not, at some point, decided to become a person worth reckoning with. That sounds arrogant. I don't mean it that way. I mean that there's a version of me, not that far back, honestly, who would have panicked the moment Prentice appeared in the doorway. Who would have rushed out to the hallway, apologized, tried to manage them privately, tried to protect everyone's feelings at the cost of her own. That version of me would have been so consumed with being palatable that she would have handed the room away before my father even sat down. What changed wasn't confidence exactly. It was something slower and harder to name. It was knowing in my body that I had done the work. Every invoice I'd sent, every Saturday in the rented kitchen, every meeting I'd prepped for until I could answer any question in my sleep. That kind of work doesn't just build a business, it builds you. It teaches you what you actually know versus what you're pretending to know. And when my father made that threat, I wasn't scared. I was clear. Those are very different things. I think about Claudette sometimes. What she said at the door, that's the version of you we're investing in. She wasn't talking about the twist with the building. She was talking about the fact that I kept my head. That I looked at a genuinely destabilizing situation and chose to think rather than react. That kind of judgment doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from having made hundreds of smaller decisions, well, for years when no one was watching and no one was going to give you credit for it either way. And then there's the part nobody talks about when they tell stories, like this one. My father is not a villain in a movie. He's a man who looked at his daughter, building something real and felt, I think, a kind of confusion that curdled into entitlement. He didn't know how to be proud of me without needing to own a piece of it. That doesn't excuse what he did. But understanding it keeps me from becoming someone who is defined by the bitterness of it. I chose eventually not to pursue legal action beyond the letter. I could have. My lawyer made that clear. But I had something I wanted more than punishment. I wanted to keep going. I wanted to hire apprentices, 2 new kitchen staff, and watch the meal kit wait list fill in 11 days and get a text from Claudette that just said told you. Letting go of the desire to make my family suffer cost me something, but it also freed up a tremendous amount of energy that I used for better things. That's what I'd want anyone watching this to hold on to, not the satisfaction of the twist, though I'd be lying if I said it wasn't satisfying, but the longer arc. The years of showing up when no one clapped, the discipline of building something solid enough that no threat could touch it, the integrity of refusing to become cruel even when cruelty was available to you. Those things are slow. They are not dramatic. But they are the actual reason the story ended the way it did. I walk into that building every morning, my building. I don't think about my father every time. Most days, that's true.